Michel was driving with his mind somewhere else, not on the road, when a black bear suddenly wandered right into his path. He reacted on instinct and swerved, but the pavement was slick from the rain. The car slid, spun, and in the next second, it clipped a rock and shot straight off the road into the woods. And out of all the places in the world to be at that exact moment, there was a woman in those same woods stepping away because she urgently needed some privacy. Michelle's car ended up crashing into her vehicle, and in the chaos, she was hit as well. Michel scrambled out, thinking he was about to see a smashed bumper or a busted headlight. But instead, he found something far worse. The woman was lying there dead. Before he could even process what he was looking at, her husband heard the noise and came running. He arrived just in time to witness the aftermath, and Michel tried to step forward and explain. But then, in the most cruel and unbelievable twist, the man slipped, fell hard into a thick tree branch, and collapsed. Just like that, he was dead on the spot too. Michel stood frozen, staring at the scene like his brain refused to accept it. He had not even had time to speak, and somehow 2 people were gone in less than a minute. He was 70 years old, and nothing in his life had ever prepared him for something this sudden, this horrifying. For a moment, he told himself to do the right thing. Call the police, report the accident. But then reality hit him, and fear took over. There was no one else around, no witnesses, no one who had seen the crash happen. Shaking and desperate, Michel made a choice he would regret. He turned around and fled back home. That night at dinner, his wife Mary noticed the scratches on his face and knew something was off. Michel broke down and told her everything: the bear, the crash, the bodies. Mary's first thought was simple. This was an accident, so why did he not call the police? Michel admitted the truth. His car was not insured. If the authorities got involved, the compensation alone could wipe them out financially, maybe even ruin them completely. Mary went quiet for a beat, then asked one sharp question: whether Michel had touched their car. When he said yes, she did not hesitate. She grabbed the keys, drove him right back to the scene, and made it clear they needed to erase every trace of him being there. As they wiped down the vehicle, they noticed something that changed everything. Inside the car was a luxury handbag, the kind that screamed money. That alone was suspicious, but Mary's curiosity did not stop there. She opened the trunk. Inside was a tennis racket and a duffel bag. And when they unzipped it, they just stared. The bag was packed with cash, more money than Michel had probably ever seen in one place. 2 million euros. In an instant, the accident stopped feeling like a disaster and started looking like a twisted kind of opportunity. The owners were dead. No one else was there. And if they played it right, that money could become theirs, and that is where everything really begins. This is how to make a killing. Mary's mind went straight into planning mode. If there were no bodies, there were no deaths. If there were no deaths, there was no crime tied to them. So they got to work. Under Mary's direction, Michel went to handle the husband's body, but when he stood over it, the reality hit him all over again. He froze, completely unable to move. Mary had to step in, and unlike Michel, she did not hesitate. She used a chainsaw to separate the body from the tree branch that had impaled him. Once it was done, they loaded both bodies into the BMW and drove back home. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, a few residents noticed an abandoned car parked along the roadside. Something about it did not feel right, so they reported it to the local police chief. Unfortunately, with Christmas just around the corner, the station was running on a skeleton crew. The rescue team would not even be able to reach the location until Monday. What no one knew was that several hours before Michel's accident, something else had already gone wrong deep in those same woods. A group of gangsters had chosen the remote forest as the location for a secret deal with a powerful boss. It was supposed to be quiet and discreet. Instead, the forest had a different plan. A bear that had not gone into hibernation suddenly appeared. Panic spread instantly. The group scattered in every direction, because in situations like that, survival becomes very simple. You only need to run faster than the slowest person. Unfortunately for the gang leader, he was that person. The bear chased him down and brutally killed him, leaving yet another body in the woods long before Michel ever crashed his car there. Back at home, Mary calmly sat at the table and began counting the cash from the duffel bag. 2 million euros, neatly packed and very real. As for the bodies they had brought back, she decided they could deal with those later. Mikkel, meanwhile, searched through the designer handbag they had found in the car, hoping there might be something else valuable inside. Instead, his hand closed around something cold and heavy. It was a handgun. Curious, he examined it, but his finger slipped on the trigger. The gun fired instantly. The bullet shot across the room and narrowly missed Mary, punching a hole straight into the wall behind her. The room went silent. Both of them looked at each other, the same disturbing realization forming in their minds. Normal people did not usually drive around with a gun and 2 million euros in cash. Whatever they had stumbled into, it probably was not clean money. Before they could even process that thought, there was a knock at the door. Both of them froze. If anyone discovered what was inside the house right now, everything would fall apart. Mary reacted quickly, stuffing the cash back into the bag and signaling Michelle to clear the table while she went to answer the door. To their shock, the visitor was Chief Bowden. He had simply stopped by to pick up a Christmas tree that Michelle and Mary had been preparing for him. What should have been a friendly visit suddenly became the most stressful moment of their lives. Inside the house, the duffel bag full of money and the handgun were sitting dangerously close to where Bowden stood. Michelle immediately understood what Mary wanted him to do. He casually leaned against the wall, positioning his body in front of the bullet hole so it would not be noticed. If Bowden decided to take a closer look at that bag, the entire secret would collapse in seconds. Strangely enough, the chief did not seem suspicious at all. The only thing he found odd was Michelle standing against the wall like that. Michelle quickly explained it away in the most ordinary way possible. After driving all day, his back was killing him, so he just needed to stand for a moment. Since they had known each other for years, Bowden did not question it. Instead, he followed Michelle outside to load the Christmas tree into his car. But just as they stepped outside, Michelle realized something horrifying. One of the bodies they had brought back earlier was still lying nearby, with 2 feet sticking out in plain sight. Thinking as fast as he could, Michelle shifted his position and carefully blocked Bowden's line of sight. Somehow, by pure luck and quick thinking, he managed to keep the chief from noticing the corpse just a few feet away. After finally sending Chief Bowden on his way, Michelle and Mary wasted no time. The moment the door closed, they went straight online and began searching for ways to dispose of a body. To their surprise, the internet offered more suggestions than they expected. One option involved feeding their remains to pigs. Apparently, pigs will eat almost anything and leave very little behind. The downside was that the process takes time, and time was exactly what they did not have. Another method suggested dissolving the bodies in sulfuric acid. It would work faster, but it also sounded extremely dangerous and complicated for 2 people who had never attempted anything like this before. Then Mary came up with a different plan. Early the next morning, they found a small boat and loaded the bodies onto it before heading upriver. That particular stretch of water was famous for its salmon runs, and where there are salmon, there are bears. Black bears frequently gathered there to feed. Mary figured that if bears were already coming to the area for fish, they would not pass up an easier meal. The plan was simple, efficient, and if it worked, it would leave almost no evidence behind. To make sure the bears noticed the bodies, they even coated them with a thick layer of honey. Michelle and Mary worked all day before finally heading back home that evening, uncertain whether their plan had actually succeeded. The night that followed was painfully long. Every hour felt heavier than the last as they waited and wondered what they would find the next day. When morning finally arrived, they returned to the river with anxious hearts. But what they saw immediately shattered their expectations. The bodies were still there. Not a single bear had touched them. And to make matters even more ridiculous, there was now a 3rd body lying nearby. It was the unlucky gang leader who had been killed by the bear the day before. What had started as 2 bodies had somehow turned into 3. Realizing the situation was getting worse instead of better, Mary quickly changed her strategy. Instead of hiding the bodies, she decided it might be safer if the police found them. So the 2 of them dragged the bodies back again. Before leaving, Mary also grabbed the gang leader's phone, casually deciding it might make a nice Christmas gift for their son. Meanwhile, back at the police station, something strange was happening as well. The toilet suddenly clogged, forcing Chief Bowden to call in a repairman. While the plumber worked on the problem, another call came in from a local resident reporting an emergency. Someone had discovered 3 people inside the abandoned car from earlier. Before Bowden could even leave the station, Officer Florence stopped him. The repairman had just discovered what caused the blockage. Hidden inside the pipes was a tightly wrapped bundle of drugs. It had clearly come from the outsiders connected to the abandoned car. At that moment, it became obvious that these people were not illegal immigrants, but drug mules transporting narcotics. This raised an important question for Chief Bowden. If they were not locals, how had they managed to cross through the forest in the first place? That meant there were likely other people involved in the operation. Baudin ordered one of the officers to keep an eye on several suspects at the station and not let anyone leave. For now, his priority was investigating the 3 bodies that had just been discovered. When Chief Baudin and Officer Florence arrived at the scene, the coroner had already completed an initial examination. According to him, the victims had not died that day. As Baudin examined the bodies more closely, something else caught his attention. All 3 of them were strangely coated in honey. At the same time, Michelle and Mary were driving away from the area, still uneasy about the entire situation. They had managed to move the bodies, but one problem remained unresolved. They still had not figured out what to do with the gun. As they passed nearby, they noticed police vehicles already surrounding the scene. Mary immediately muttered a few curses under her breath and told Michelle to keep driving forward like nothing was wrong. But before they could leave the area, Officer Florence stepped onto the road and stopped their car. She informed them that the road ahead was blocked and suggested they take a different route. Moments later, Chief Baudin approached their vehicle and briefly explained what had happened. According to him, the case looked disturbing, and he suspected the killer might be some kind of twisted individual. Ironically, the real culprits were sitting right there in the car, pretending to be concerned citizens. Mary calmly asked whether the killer had left fingerprints behind. Officer Florence responded that the suspects had actually left plenty of clues, which made Michelle's stomach tighten with anxiety. Even though they tried to appear relaxed, both of their hearts were racing. Thinking quickly, they claimed they were simply on their way to the supermarket. Chief Baudin did not suspect anything. Under the watchful eyes of the officers, Michelle slowly turned the car around and drove off toward the supermarket. After arriving at the supermarket, Michelle still could not calm down. His mind kept circling back to the same fear. Sooner or later, the police would figure everything out, and when they did, it would lead straight to them. Mary, on the other hand, remained surprisingly calm. From her point of view, the situation was already working in their favor. Chief Baudin had convinced himself that the killer was some kind of disturbed individual. As long as the investigation continued in that direction, no one would suspect an ordinary couple like them. But even with that reassurance, the tension between them started to rise. While walking through the aisles, the 2 of them fell into a heated argument. Michelle did not want anything to do with the money anymore. The whole thing had gone too far. Mary quickly pushed back. She suggested that if Michelle really felt guilty, they could always turn the money in. But if that happened, she would also make sure the police knew who had masterminded the entire situation. Then she reminded him of something much more personal. If they were caught and everything fell apart, who would take care of their sick son? Faced with that reality, Michelle had no choice but to back down. Meanwhile, Chief Baudin and Officer Florence had returned to the police station. Not long after, the coroner called with new information. The identities of the bodies had finally been confirmed. The blonde woman and the man were not tourists as originally assumed. They were drug dealers, both with serious criminal records. The moment Baudin heard this, the pieces in his mind started connecting. The drug mules discovered earlier might be tied to these victims. That meant both cases could be part of the same operation. While reviewing the evidence board, something else suddenly caught his attention. A small butterfly hairpin pinned among the items. That evening, when Baudin returned home, he asked his daughter about the hairpin. She casually claimed she had left it at a friend's house, but Baudin immediately sensed that she was lying. Under pressure, the truth finally came out. His daughter admitted that she had spent time in a car with someone that night. Baudin misunderstood the situation completely. For a brief and very awkward moment, he believed his daughter had some kind of disturbing attraction to corpses. The accusation immediately triggered an angry reaction, and she stormed away. In reality, it was simply a misunderstanding. Earlier that night, before the bodies had been placed in the car, Baudin's daughter and her boyfriend had used the vehicle as a private place to be together. After cooling down and thinking things through, Baudin realized he had jumped to the wrong conclusion. He went to his daughter's room to apologize. Even though she did not want to talk about it anymore, Baudin still needed to ask a few careful questions that might help clarify the timeline of the case. While all of this was unfolding, Michelle and Mary were busy creating a different kind of solution. They arrived at a local adult hotel and approached the owner with a very specific request. They wanted her help creating an alibi. All she had to do was confirm that Michelle and Mary had stayed there on the night of the incident. The owner immediately saw an opportunity to make some easy money. Michelle and Mary promised a generous payment, and the deal was quickly sealed. Once the agreement was made, the owner even invited them to visit a nearby strip club. For Michelle and Mary, it felt like stepping into an entirely different world. For a while, they tried to relax while dancers and guests flirted around them. After spending some time there, they finally returned home. At that moment, Michelle and Mary believed they had tied up all the loose ends. The bodies were gone, an alibi had been arranged, and the police seemed to be chasing the wrong suspects. For the first time since the accident, They thought they might actually get a peaceful night of sleep. But the truth was, the situation had already grown far beyond their control. Early the next morning, Chief Baudin's daughter arrived at the police station to cooperate with the investigation. Officer Florence carefully walked her through the events of that night, asking for every detail she could remember. From her explanation, the situation slowly became clearer. That evening, her boyfriend's brother had been at home, leaving them with no privacy. So the two of them went out looking for a quiet place. While driving around, they happened to notice a black car parked along the road. Since her boyfriend's own car was small and cramped, they decided to spend some time in the black car instead. For them, it was just a temporary solution for privacy. But their story revealed something important. At some point after they left, someone had placed 3 bodies inside that car. To confirm the timeline, the police reviewed surveillance footage from cameras near the area. According to the recordings, Baudin's daughter and her boyfriend were only inside the car for about 17 minutes. Then more than 10 minutes later, residents discovered the vehicle and reported it. During that entire window of time, the cameras monitoring vehicles entering and leaving the mountains did not capture anything suspicious. After discussing the situation, Baudin and Florence came to the same conclusion. The most suspicious people were the couple who lived closest to the crime scene, Michel and Mary. Meanwhile, Michel had already started using some of the stolen money. He spent a large amount buying heating oil for their home. Of course, the cash came straight from the duffel bag. When Mary found out, she was furious. To her, Michel's behavior showed he was letting fear control him. Instead of staying calm, he kept acting like someone waiting to get caught. Not long after, Chief Baudin paid them another visit. Mary quickly turned off the television and greeted him with an overly cheerful smile, trying her best to appear relaxed. Baudin assured them that there was no need to be nervous. He was only there to ask a few routine questions. Officer Florence then asked where they had been on the night of the 21st and whether they had seen or heard anything unusual. Mary immediately claimed they had spent the night having fun at the Love Cupid Club, while their son Dominique had been sleeping at home. Michel awkwardly backed up her story, but the lie did not come naturally to either of them. Without any experience in deception, their nervous behavior made the story feel forced. Because of that, Chief Baudin asked if he could speak with Dominique as well. Michel and Mary had no choice but to agree. Fortunately for them, Dominique suffered from a mental condition that made it difficult for him to communicate with strangers. Still, throughout the entire interaction, Michel and Mary remained visibly tense. Chief Baudin noticed it right away. His suspicions grew stronger, but he did not show it on the surface. Instead, he calmly left the house with Officer Florence. Once they were back in the car, Florence revealed something unexpected. Michael and Mary could not have been at the Love Cupid Hotel that night because she herself had been there. Baudin was slightly surprised to learn that his usually composed officer had attended such an event. However, he did not criticize her. Instead, he reflected that everyone spends their life trying to understand themselves, and he sincerely hoped she would eventually find the right partner. While the investigation continued, Michel found himself overwhelmed with guilt. He eventually went to the local church and confessed everything to the priest. At first, Michel simply wanted to unburden his conscience. But when the priest learned that Michel had $2 million in cash, the conversation took a different direction. Instead of urging him to turn himself in, the priest convinced Michel to hide the money inside the church. According to him, only God had the power to cleanse evil. Michel, still shaken and desperate for guidance, actually believed him. When Mary later discovered that Michel had secretly moved the money to the church, she nearly collapsed from shock. Years of frustration and resentment suddenly exploded. She unleashed all of her anger at Michel. Michel simply stood there in silence. Eventually, Mary grew tired of arguing. With nothing left to say, she turned around and walked away. On Christmas Eve, 2 detectives were assigned to travel to the town and assist Chief Baudin with the growing investigation. It was supposed to be a routine reinforcement for a complicated case. What they did not realize was that someone had already been watching their every move. While the 2 officers stopped at a convenience store during their trip, the situation suddenly turned deadly. A man named Sammy burst into the store and opened fire, killing everyone inside.
Vous payez en carte ou en espèces? Billette pour le café?
Afterward, he calmly took the identity of one of the officers and continued the journey as if nothing had happened. Soon after, Sammy arrived at the police station and introduced himself to Chief Baudin as the detective who had been sent to help with the investigation. When Baudin asked about the second officer, Sammy casually explained that the man had decided to spend the holiday with his children instead. At first, Chief Baudin had no reason to doubt him. The only thing that felt slightly unusual was that the man seemed a little strange. Sammy then began asking questions about the case, trying to gather as much information as possible. Boudin kept his answers vague. From his perspective, the investigation was still unclear, and since it was Christmas Eve, the team would wait until after the next day's family lunch before continuing their work. Sammy clearly did not like the delay. Sensing the tension, Boudin even mentioned that he might contact Sammy's superior to explain the situation. That suggestion made Sammy uneasy, because any deeper verification could expose his identity. With no better option, he agreed to Boudin's plan and quietly checked into a nearby motel. Meanwhile, Michelle and Mary had no idea that someone dangerous had entered the town. As requested earlier, they went to meet with Chief Boudin. This time, Boudin got straight to the point. He directly asked whether they had anything to do with the bodies that had been discovered. Mary looked ready to argue again, but Boudin calmly explained something important. He would soon step away from the case, and the investigation would be transferred to the homicide division. Those detectives would dig much deeper, and if Michelle and Mary were involved, they would not be able to escape the truth. At that moment, Michelle made a sudden decision. He took all the blame on himself and insisted that Mary knew nothing about what had happened. Hearing this made Mary's eyes fill with tears. Chief Boudin suggested that Michelle should turn himself in after the holiday was over. Then he proposed something unexpected. If the case came down to a hit and run, their son Dominique could technically take the blame. Because of Dominique's condition, he would not be considered legally responsible. The worst outcome might only involve a juvenile facility, but for Michelle and Mary, the idea of sacrificing their son was unthinkable. Faced with that possibility, Michelle finally revealed the truth about the money. Now 4 people knew about the hidden cash: Michelle, Mary, Chief Boudin, and the priest. They gathered at the church to discuss what to do next. The priest continued to speak in a righteous tone, but it became increasingly clear that his real interest was keeping the money for himself. Chief Boudin, however, was far less naive than Michelle. He quickly saw through the priest's intentions and refused to accept his manipulation. The discussion grew heated until Boudin finally asserted his authority as a police officer. He shut down the argument, took possession of the money bag, and left the church. What none of them realized was that Sammy had been watching the entire scene from a distance. Soon afterward, Sammy contacted his brother in Mexico and reported that the goods had arrived at the designated location. There had been a small complication during the delivery, which caused a delay, but he assured his brother that he would handle the situation. Not long after that, Chief Boudin returned to the police station with the money bag. He stood in front of the safe for a moment, clearly thinking things through. Eventually, he decided the right thing to do was turn the money in as evidence. But just as he opened the safe, Sammy suddenly appeared inside the station. The situation turned dangerous in an instant. At the last possible moment, Officer Florence reacted and shot Sammy, killing him before he could act. Chief Boudin had narrowly escaped a disaster. Still suspicious, he took a closer look at the man's identification. After carefully comparing the documents, the truth became obvious. Sammy was never a real police officer at all. On the other side of town, Michelle and Mary prepared for Christmas Eve as if nothing had happened. They dressed up and tried to enjoy what might be their last peaceful holiday together as a family. Both of them carried a heavy mix of emotions. Fear, guilt, and uncertainty were all tangled together. For the first time in a long while, Mary opened her heart to Michelle. Ever since their son had been diagnosed with his illness, the two of them had rarely shared a calm and honest moment like this. Life had been filled with stress and worry, and quiet conversations had slowly disappeared from their marriage. Trying to hold on to some sense of normalcy, the family drove out to refuel their car. But when they arrived at the gas station, the night took another shocking turn. Inside the station, they discovered 3 bodies. 2 police officers and the store clerk had been killed earlier that day. Michelle immediately understood the opportunity in front of him. He took the handgun that had not yet been dealt with and placed it into the hand of one of the dead men. After that, he contacted the police and specifically asked for Chief Boudin to come to the scene. Soon afterward, everyone returned to the police station to sort through the situation. As they reviewed the evidence, the scale of the case began to reveal itself. Based on the street value of the drugs, the packages found in the police station, and the bag of money that Michelle had discovered earlier, investigators estimated that at least 27 pounds of narcotics were missing. Michelle quickly insisted that neither he nor Mary had anything to do with the drugs. However, during the discussion, he unexpectedly brought up the gun again, which only added another strange detail to the case. Just then, Sammy's phone suddenly rang. Chief Boudin picked it up and answered the call. In that moment, he realized something important. The situation was far from over. Whoever was behind the drugs would not simply disappear. Much bigger forces were involved. Later that evening, Chief Boudin returned home to spend the holiday with his ex-wife and daughter. Trying to bring some happiness into the day, He gave his daughter money to buy a car. The gesture moved her deeply, and she wrapped him in a tight hug. Elsewhere in town, Officer Florence was experiencing her own unexpected moment. A spark of romance had started between her and one of the former drug mules, and the two of them even decided to spend Christmas together. At the same time, Michelle and Mary tried to continue their evening like a normal family. They went out to a restaurant and shared a meal together. During dinner, Michelle received a message from Chief Baudin. The text told him not to turn himself in. Baudin promised that he would find a way to handle the situation. The following day, however, Baudin faced pressure from above. He was called in by the police commander for a serious reprimand. 6 people had died in the town, and the investigation still had no clear answers. To protect the people involved, Baudin lied. He claimed that all of the deaths were the result of conflicts between rival gangs. The commander clearly did not believe him. Then something unexpected happened. The commander received a phone call from her ex-husband. After listening for a moment, her expression changed completely. It turned out that their son was studying piano in Paris, and the cost of supporting him there was extremely high. Noticing the shift in her attitude, Chief Baudin seized the moment. He casually asked about the price of a good piano, as if discussing the subject out of curiosity. Soon afterward, he quietly provided money to help cover those expenses. Just like that, the commander accepted his explanation. Officially, the deaths in the town would now be recorded as gang-related violence. As Baudin escorted her out, he handed over the money personally. But before leaving, the commander offered a final warning. She reminded him that disturbing a beehive always brings consequences. Sooner or later, the queen bee will come looking for the one who caused the trouble. It was a clear message. Somewhere out there were much bigger and far more dangerous people behind this entire mess. Just as the warning predicted, trouble eventually arrived. On the night of the 31st, a gangster finally tracked down Michelle's home. The moment he appeared, Michelle and Mary knew they were in serious danger. They were forced to sit down and listen as the man mocked them, treating them like insignificant insects that had foolishly tried to steal something far beyond their reach. Then the situation quickly turned violent. The gangster began beating both of them and demanded the money immediately. In the middle of the assault, Michelle was stabbed, and the situation looked like it might end right there. Seeing her husband in danger, Mary reacted instantly. She claimed that she knew where both the money and the missing drugs were hidden. The statement bought Michelle a moment of relief and stopped the attack. Mary then led the gangster outside into the yard, insisting that everything had been buried nearby. For a moment, it looked like she was cooperating, but suddenly she made her move. She knocked out the bodyguard who had been accompanying the gangster. Unfortunately, the gangster reacted quickly and raised his gun at her. At that exact moment, help came from the most unexpected place. Their son Dominique suddenly appeared driving a bulldozer. Seeing the massive machine approaching, the gangster panicked and stumbled backward down a nearby slope. Dominique immediately chased after him. At the same time, Mary finished off the unconscious bodyguard to make sure he would not get back up. Dominique did not hesitate. With determination in his eyes, he drove the bulldozer straight over the gangster, ending the threat once and for all. Just like that, the crisis was over.
Touche pas à mon mec!
After everything they had survived, the family finally allowed themselves a moment of relief. They went into town to celebrate together. For the first time, Dominique made a request of his parents. He asked if he could spend the holiday alone with his friends. After everything he had just done, Michelle and Mary did not hesitate to agree. Meanwhile, the two of them returned to the Cupid Club to quietly reinforce their alibi one last time. The next day, Chief Baudin took care of the remaining evidence in his own way. The bodies were fed to pigs, leaving almost nothing behind. In the end, the impossible had happened. So the moral of the story is, if you see a bear on the road, just stop the car, because swerving might somehow lead to stolen money, drug dealers, and your kids solving everything with a bulldozer.